comes in the house and you're in the living room, dining room area, did any conversation take place?
I don't remember any conversation.
You know what she came to the house for?
Nothing.
Okay. Tell me what happened then.
May 27th, 1979, Harris County, Texas. A 20-year-old girl went to her best friend's house next door and went missing. 4 days later, her blood-bathed body was found near a stream. The vicious murder of this young girl left a question in the community as it became a spine-chilling act, leaving no trail of witnesses. Let's hear the story of Inez Deaton, whose murder remained a mystery for 20 long years. Born on September 16, 1957, Inez got married as soon as she got to the age of 18. By the year 1979, Inez was a mother to a 2-year-old girl. In the neighborhood lived Winona Bible, a close friend to Inez. One usual morning in May of 1979, Inez, while working in her kitchen, needed to use the phone. Back then, usually 1 or 2 houses in a locality owned phones. For Inez, there was one at Winona's place. She left her home to go to her house just next door. As soon as she reached the residence of her friend Winona, the little trip became the last sight of her being seen alive. It was as if she dissolved into thin air after that. 4 days later, a local man found a body posed on the slope of a small stream, the Greens Bayou, on the Homestead Road in the city. It was soon identified as the body of Inez, visible with the scars left by a devil all over her. Bathed in blood, she didn't have her pants on. Her panties were partially torn at one leg, and her body had stab wounds on the upper side of her torso, counting up to 11, of which 9 were in the front and 2 were in the back. Curiously, the wounds had been made with a strange object, an ice pick. After the body of Inez was found, her friend Winona Bible told the police she had gone out with her family and was not home when Inez might have come visiting. In fact, no one was at home that day, except her cousin Danny Bible, who in turn told police that Inez had never stopped by. Winona on some level noticed that Danny was acting strange and showed some confidence in him being possibly involved with what happened to Inez, but she was not sure. The suspicion became stronger when Danny went missing on the day of Inez's funeral. The only possible suspect until that point disappeared from the city, and there was no trail or clue for the detective in charge of the case, Ronnie Phillips, to follow. Male fluid was found on Inez's body, but near to nothing could be done with that due to lack of advancements in forensic technologies at the time. The community in Houston, along with Inez's near and dear ones, were left wondering, who was this ice pick killer? The ferocious assault and murder of Inez remained unsolved. The case went cold due to a lack of evidence and managed to exist only in the memories of people. 2 long decades passed. On November 7th, 1998, around 600 miles away from Texas, in the city of Port Allen, Louisiana, Detective Randall Walkers from the Sheriff's Department registered a case for assault. A woman named Tara Robinson was staying in a motel room along with a man. The room doorbell rang, and the man addressed a visitor, who was a guest staying 2 rooms away in the same motel. After they had a little chat, the man went out. Few minutes passed and the doorbell rang again. This time around, Tara, who was alone in the room, opened the door. It was the same guest from before. Before Tara could say anything, he forced his way inside the room and strong-armed her. He choked her throat and threw her onto the bed and then started assaulting her. During the ordeal, he kept warning her repeatedly, and she kept retaliating to his attacks. Having had his way with her, he couldn't stay around and got enraged at her. With Tara forcing herself away, his anger lashed out as he began to hit Tara. He bound and gagged the woman before trying to stuff her into a duffel bag, but somehow she managed to escape the scene. The intruder also fled from the room after that. With the help of Tara and a picture borrowed from the stepson of the attacker, who was discovered playing Nintendo just 2 rooms away, the attacker was finally arrested from Florida. The man apprehended was Danny Paul Bible. Once arrested, Danny was brought back to Louisiana where the incident had taken place. When he was interrogated, Detective in charge Randall Walkers suspected beforehand that there was something more about the life of Danny, and that he was not a one-time criminal. Surprisingly, this time around, Danny did nothing to get away, nor deny or outsmart. He just smiled and showed an urge to confess. He requested a pack of cigarettes and the Holy Bible for one night. Once his requests were fulfilled, he said, "Tomorrow, I'll tell y'all some of it." From here on, he opened the diary of his life, starting from 1979, confessing for the first time about his crime spree. He started by recalling about Inez Deaton. When asked about the first time he assaulted someone, his exact words were, "I think it was a Deaton, not sure." That was the first time in 20 years that a lead was finally spoken about Inez, and it ended up being by the killer himself. He confessed that he visited his cousin Winona around that time in Houston, and one of her friends, Inez, stopped by the house one day. Danny spoke of his character that the minute he saw Inez that day, he decided to have her anyway, and so he did. He assaulted the girl right there, and with utter cruelty, stabbed her body, making sure that she breathed her last. He then loaded the body in the trunk of his car and went to the dump on the slopes of Greens Bayou.
So she comes in the house and you're in the living room, dining room area. Did any conversation take place?
I don't remember any conversation.
You know what she came to the house for?
Nothing.
Okay. Tell me what happened then. You remember loading her in the car?
Nothing.
In a similar subtle manner, Danny confessed to 4 other vicious murders and at least 9 assaults in 20 years. Each of them was worse than the previous ones and were in the heat of a momentous urge. After killing Inez, Danny left the state and moved to Montana. His violent nature continued there when he set his new girlfriend's car on fire, and also hit her so hard that she needed stitches on her face, merely because he didn't like her haircut. His uncontrollable, irrational urges took a scary turn when he moved back to North Texas in 1983. He took a job in the city of Weatherford. One day while driving, he saw Pam Hudgens walking down the street. She was the roommate of Danny's sister-in-law. He picked her up on his drive. Without a second thought, he decided to kill her. He stabbed her to death and hanged her corpse from a roadside fence. Then he went inside his sister-in-law's house, who was carrying her son. Danny Bible pushed them down the stairs, and then he killed her using an ice pick. After her packing their bodies into garbage bags and then dumped them in a field nearby. Why did he do that? He did not seem to know the answer to this question. After the multiple homicides, he again left the state and flew back to Montana, where he assaulted a 8-year-old repeatedly and also kidnapped a woman. The maniac was arrested for the first time in 1984 on the murder charges of Pam Hudgens. Danny got sentenced to 25 years in prison, but he managed to get free in 1992 with a mandatory supervision parole. This little stint did nothing to his being, and he kept on roaming as a free serial killer, changing for the worse. In San Jacinto County, northeast of Houston, he assaulted 5 of his nieces repeatedly in the back of a converted bus. In 1996, he moved to Louisiana. Danny never stuck to a single place for too long and was always finding odd jobs. In the time span of more than 2 years in Louisiana, he assaulted a number of young girls wherever he lived. Danny managed to keep changing locations, remaining under the cover, and thus escape the gaze of the authorities during those times. As the self-confessed serial killer openly narrated his 20-year run to Detective Randall Walker's, he surely tasted remorse when he decided to speak about it out loud. Despite Detective Randall giving Danny a premature promise for a free life if he confessed, Danny was sent to the death chamber in June of 2003 for the murder of Inez Deaton. It took only 3 hours for the jury to decide his fate. The day he was being driven back to Texas in a van by prison guards, a bit of his karma struck, and the van got into a head-on collision, killing the officer behind the wheel. Danny nearly escaped death, but got severely injured and wound up in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And also, the accident became the cause for years of delay in closing the case. Danny's attorney, Jeremy Shepherd, asked for a reprieve, which was to cancel the death penalty. Danny, being in a wheelchair, was no longer a threat to society. But this time, all the arguments from the culprit side got instantly overruled. A lethal injection was to be administered to the ice pick killer, as it was the sole execution method used by the state of Texas. Danny, by that time, had developed a number of diseases. Danny's attorneys strongly condemned the state's decision to use IVs on a sick man. They filed a lawsuit saying that the lethal execution could go extremely wrong, and he could end up suffering in nothing but deadly pain. But none of the arguments stood, although they did waste much time delaying the execution. Attorneys of the guilty then proposed other alternatives to end his life. They insisted on using a firing squad on him, or using the nitrogen gas to cut off oxygen supply to his head. But Assistant Texas Attorney General Stephen Hoffman said in a court filing that the lawsuit was a meritless tactic to delay his well-deserved execution. Finally, on June 27, 2018, after a long delay, the day finally arrived for the execution of the ice pick killer. After all the fuss about his weak body, the medical team easily found veins in both his hands, and a lethal injection of phenobarbital got IV'd into him. On that day, for 15 minutes, between 6:17 to 6:32 p.m., Danny shook due to Parkinson's tremors, his voice quavering as he muttered his only last words as, "Burning, it hurts." Danny Bible took his last breaths before closing one eye, snoring, and falling forever silent. Inez's family, however, didn't attend the execution of the girl's murderer. The family of Pam Hudgens, who also lost her life to Danny, did give a closing note after his execution saying, "We are glad to have witnessed him draw his last breath." The long-gone life of Inez got closure after nearly 40 years of time. And along with her, all the other victims who were traumatized or murdered by that man.